What if everything we think we know about ancient Egypt is incomplete? What if the story carved into textbooks, repeated in classrooms, and accepted as settled history is only the surface of something much older, much stranger, and far more unsettling? Because the pyramids do not feel like ruins in the ordinary sense. They feel deliberate, measured, almost untouchable in their certainty. They rise from the Giza plateau with a silence that has outlived empires, religions, languages, and entire civilizations. Dynasties vanished. Kingdoms collapsed. Armies crossed deserts and disappeared. Yet these monuments remained, as if they had been placed there not merely to endure time, but to confront it. And the longer they stand, the more disturbing the questions become. What if the pyramids were never meant to be tombs? What if the Great Sphinx is far older than the civilization usually credited with building it? What if ancient Egypt inherited part of its legacy from a chapter of human history that no longer exists in any complete form? These are not small questions. They strike at the foundation of how we understand the ancient world, human development, and the story of civilization itself. The official chronology is familiar. Around 2500 BC, during Egypt's Old Kingdom, the Great Pyramid of Giza was constructed as the funerary monument of Pharaoh Khufu. It was built, according to the mainstream view, through extraordinary organization, skilled labor, clever engineering, and immense state power. The Egyptians, with copper tools, stone hammers, sledges, ramps, and manpower, created one of the most astonishing structures ever raised by human hands. That explanation is not absurd. Ancient Egypt was an extraordinary civilization. Its architects, astronomers, laborers, and planners were capable of feats that still command respect. Yet the Great Pyramid has always exerted a strange pressure on the imagination, because it appears to sit on the edge of what should have been possible for its age. Its alignment to true north is astonishingly precise. Its sides are nearly perfectly square. Its base is leveled with remarkable accuracy. Its proportions appear mathematically intentional. Its internal layout remains, in many respects, enigmatic. Even stripped of every fringe theory and every speculative claim, the monument still refuses to become ordinary. And that is where the mystery begins. The Great Pyramid is not simply large. It is disciplined. The stonework does not suggest brute force alone. It suggests design under control. Some blocks weigh several tons. Others, especially those used in relieving chambers and structural zones, weigh far more. Moving such masses is one problem. Positioning them with precision is another. Coordinating quarrying, transport, shaping, alignment, and final placement across an immense construction site without modern machinery would have required not just labor, but a command of process so sophisticated that it still provokes debate. For many researchers, that debate ends there. The pyramid is extraordinary because the ancient Egyptians were extraordinary. No lost civilization is needed. No vanished technology. No outside intervention. Only time, genius, administration, and relentless human effort. But others are not convinced that the conventional explanation accounts for the full picture. Because the more closely the pyramid is studied, the more it begins to resemble more than a royal tomb. It begins to look like a statement. A code in stone. A monument that may have served symbolic, astronomical, ceremonial, and possibly even scientific functions all at once. Certain ratios within the Great Pyramid have long attracted attention. Some interpreters point to relationships that appear to echo mathematical constants such as pi and the golden ratio. Mainstream scholars often warn against reading too much into these correspondences, arguing that some numerical relationships may emerge naturally from construction choices or retrospective interpretation. Yet the persistence of these patterns keeps the debate alive. Was this structure merely massive? Or was it encoded? Its placement matters too. The pyramids of Giza are not scattered randomly across the desert. They sit within a landscape that appears conceptually ordered. The plateau itself dominates the horizon west of the Nile, in the direction of the setting sun, a region deeply associated in Egyptian thought with death, transition, and the afterlife. Yet beyond religious symbolism lies another layer, celestial orientation. The ancient Egyptians watched the sky with extraordinary care. Stars were not decorative to them. They were navigational, agricultural, mythic, and sacred. Cosmic order was not separate from earthly order. It was the model for it. And so the internal shafts of the Great Pyramid have fascinated observers for generations. Often described as air shafts, though their function remains debated, some appear oriented toward regions of the sky associated with stars that held religious significance. Orion, linked in some interpretations to Osiris. Sirius, associated with Isis. Circumpolar stars, eternal and unmoving, symbols of immortality. Whether these alignments were symbolic, practical, ritualistic, or some combination of all three, they reinforce a central impression: the pyramid was not designed in isolation from the heavens. It was part of a conversation with the sky. And once that realization takes hold, another question emerges. Why was this civilization so obsessed with cosmic order? Why encode celestial relationships into stone? Why devote staggering resources to the reproduction of heavenly patterns on Earth? In the mainstream view, the answer lies in religion. The pyramid helped guarantee the king's transformation after death. It was a machine of resurrection in symbolic form, a monument designed to aid passage into the afterlife and bind rulership to divine order. But for alternative theorists, that explanation, though powerful, feels incomplete. Because the pyramids do not just evoke religion. They evoke function. Not necessarily in the modern industrial sense, but in the sense that every angle, chamber, shaft, and dimension appears purposeful beyond decoration. This has given rise to theories that the Great Pyramid may have served as more than a burial monument. Some have proposed that it operated as an initiation chamber, a ceremonial device engineered to induce transformation in consciousness. Others have speculated that its geometry, location, and materials allowed it to interact with natural forces in ways no longer understood. More radical interpretations imagine an energy structure, a resonant machine, a kind of ancient instrument tuned to frequencies of earth or sky. Most of these ideas remain unproven. Some are highly controversial. Some are rejected outright by archaeologists. And yet they continue to circulate for a reason: the structure itself feels too exact, too intentional, too resistant to simplification. Then there is the matter of construction. How exactly were the stones moved? The orthodox answer centers on ramps, sledges, lubricated surfaces, organized crews, and progressive engineering. Evidence exists for sled transport in ancient Egypt. Quarry marks, workers' villages, tool traces, and logistical remains all support the conclusion that Egyptians built the pyramids themselves. And yet disagreements remain over the details. What kind of ramps were used? Straight ramps would have required enormous volumes of material. Spiral ramps raise problems of maneuverability and visibility. Internal ramp theories solve some issues while creating others. No single explanation has closed the discussion completely. That gap has become fertile ground for alternative models. Some propose advanced lifting techniques that did not survive into recorded history. Some speculate about sophisticated counterweight systems. Others move into the realm of resonance, vibration, and acoustics, suggesting that ancient builders may have possessed knowledge of sound and material interaction that we do not associate with the Bronze Age. Modern science does investigate acoustic phenomena, resonance, and the effects of vibration on matter, but there is no accepted evidence that the pyramids were built through acoustic levitation. Still, the idea persists because it touches something deeper than engineering. It suggests that knowledge can be lost. That history is not a straight line of progress. That entire methods of understanding the physical world might vanish and leave behind only impossible-looking results. And once one begins to entertain the possibility of lost knowledge, the horizon expands rapidly. Because Egypt is not alone. Monumental pyramidal structures appear across the globe. In Mesoamerica, towering step pyramids rose from cities separated from Egypt by oceans and millennia. In South America, ancient ceremonial platforms and sacred constructions suggest parallel impulses toward elevation, geometry, and cosmic symbolism. In Mesopotamia, ziggurats linked temple and sky. In Asia, pyramidal and terraced forms appear within sacred architecture. Across cultures, there are recurring motifs: celestial observation, sacred mountains, divine descent, floods, cycles of destruction, and knowledge bestowed or inherited. None of this proves a single global civilization. Convergent design is real. Human beings faced with gravity, stone, hierarchy, ritual, and symbolic ambition often arrive at monumental forms that are structurally stable and visually commanding. Yet the recurrence is striking. So are the myths. Flood narratives appear in many ancient traditions. Stories of a former age, an earlier greatness, a forgotten order, a golden world destroyed by catastrophe. These themes are widespread. In Plato's dialogues, Atlantis emerges as the most famous expression of that memory, an advanced society destroyed in a single terrible event. To many historians, Atlantis is a philosophical allegory, not a literal geography. But for others, it may preserve a distorted memory of real prehistoric upheaval. This possibility gained renewed intensity with modern interest in the end of the last ice age. Around the close of the Pleistocene, global climate changed dramatically. Massive ice sheets retreated. Sea levels rose. Entire coastlines vanished beneath water. Landscapes once inhabited by human beings now lie submerged. If complex societies existed in vulnerable coastal zones before these changes, much of their material record could have been lost. That idea has enormous consequences, because our image of prehistory is only as complete as the evidence that survived. And survival is uneven. Stone endures. Wood rots. Coastal settlements drown. Records burn. Civilizations can leave behind little more than anomalies, myths, and fragments too disconnected to form an official history. Under this lens, the pyramids begin to take on a different role. Not necessarily the products of Atlantis in any simplistic sense, but perhaps the descendants of knowledge that came through older channels than we currently recognize. Perhaps Egypt was not the beginning of high civilization, but the inheritor of a legacy already ancient by the time pharaonic dynasties emerged. That brings us to the Great Sphinx. If the pyramids dominate by geometry, the Sphinx dominates by presence. It does not merely sit in the landscape. It watches. Its body is leonine, immense, fused into the bedrock itself. Its human face, weathered and damaged, stares eastward as if toward a dawn it has seen thousands upon thousands of times. Officially, the Sphinx is generally attributed to the reign of Khafra, around 2500 BC, and understood as part of the same monumental complex as the nearby Pyramid and Valley Temple. But the Sphinx has become a focal point of one of the most provocative debates in alternative archaeology, the question of erosion. Some geologists and independent researchers have argued that parts of the Sphinx enclosure display weathering patterns more consistent with prolonged water exposure than with wind and sound alone. If that interpretation were correct, it would imply that significant rainfall affected the monument at a time when the climate of the region was wetter than it is today, possibly thousands of years earlier than the standard dynastic date. This argument remains disputed. Many geologists reject the older dating and attribute the erosion to a combination of factors including salt weathering, wind, moisture cycling, and the quality of the stone layers themselves. But the controversy has not faded. Because if the Sphinx were substantially older than the Old Kingdom, the implications would be explosive. It would mean that one of the most iconic monuments on Earth belonged to a forgotten phase of civilization. It would mean Egypt's sacred landscape may have roots reaching far deeper than pharaonic history. It would mean the timeline is wrong. And the Sphinx offers other provocations. Its head appears unusually small in proportion to its massive body. Some researchers have suggested that the head may have been recarved from an earlier, larger form. Perhaps a lion. Perhaps another sacred figure. If so, the monument we see now would be a revision of something even older. A monument inherited, altered, and reinterpreted by later rulers. This speculation becomes even more intriguing when combined with astronomical theories. One of the most famous proposes that the Sphinx, in leonine form, was oriented toward the constellation Leo at the time of the vernal equinox around 10,500 BC. In this broader model, the Giza complex itself reflects a grand celestial pattern tied to a remote epoch near the end of the last ice age. The Orion correlation theory, associated with the arrangement of the pyramids and the stars of Orion's belt, extends this idea further, suggesting that Giza was laid out as a terrestrial mirror of the heavens. To critics, these theories impose patterns where none were intended. To supporters, they reveal a level of astronomical sophistication difficult to dismiss. Either way, one date returns again and again in speculative literature around 10,500 BC. Why does it matter? Because it falls near a profound transitional period in Earth's climatic history. A time of melting ice, rising seas, ecological shifts, and possible regional catastrophes. A time when memory could fracture. A time when survivors, if there were survivors, might preserve fragments of knowledge in myth, ritual, and monument. And this is where mythological traditions from beyond Egypt begin to converge in the imagination. In Mesopotamian narratives, divine or semi-divine beings descend from the heavens and impart knowledge to humanity. In later speculative interpretations, the Anunnaki become central figures in a radically different version of ancient history, not simply mythic beings, but visitors, engineers, or civilizing powers. Such interpretations go far beyond what mainstream Assyriology accepts, and ancient texts are far more complex and symbolic than popular fringe retellings suggest. Yet the fascination endures because these stories place advanced knowledge at the dawn of civilization. Teachers from the sky, bringers of order, transmitters of architecture, astronomy, law, and sacred sciences. Even outside Mesopotamia, the pattern echoes. Culture heroes appear in many traditions, figures who arrive after chaos, establish measurement, give agriculture, reveal writing, chart the stars, build cities, and restore balance. Whether understood as gods, ancestors, survivors, or mythologized memory, they point to a recurring intuition in human culture that civilization began not gradually, but with a transfer. A gift, a restoration, a return of something already known. Could the pyramids belong to that pattern? Not as crude evidence of extraterrestrials or fantasy machinery, but as monuments preserving the afterimage of knowledge from an earlier world? It is impossible to say with certainty. But certainty is precisely what these monuments resist. They sit at the intersection of archaeology, astronomy, geology, mythology, engineering, and psychology. They invite measurement and projection in equal force. They expose a deep human tension, the struggle between what can be demonstrated and what seems to exceed explanation. That tension is intensified by the symbolic power of the pyramid itself. The pyramid is not just a shape. It is a statement of ascent, a mountain made by mind, a stable convergence of earth and sky. Wide at the base, narrow at the summit, it compresses multiplicity into unity. It rises from the horizontal world into a single point, a geometry that feels at once practical and metaphysical. That is one reason pyramids reappear across cultures. They are structurally brilliant, yes, but also psychologically archetypal. They embody elevation, hierarchy, transcendence, durability, and order. To build one is to translate a worldview into form. In Egypt, that worldview was inseparable from Ma'at, the principle of cosmic balance, truth, and order. The pharaoh did not merely govern a kingdom. He maintained alignment between heaven and earth. Monumental architecture was therefore not only political display. It was participation in cosmic law. This may explain part of the precision. The closer a monument came to celestial order, the more effectively it embodied sacred truth. Under this interpretation, the pyramid does not need to be a machine in the modern sense. It is a machine of meaning, an engine of alignment, a structure designed to stabilize metaphysical order through geometry, orientation, ritual, and royal power. And yet even that may not exhaust the monument. Because recent decades have shown again and again that ancient sites still contain hidden surprises. Voids have been detected in the Great Pyramid using modern scanning techniques. Subterranean structures around ancient monuments continue to be investigated. Buried chambers, sealed corridors, unfinished spaces, unknown functions, these discoveries keep the old questions alive. The monuments have not finished speaking. We are still learning how to ask them better questions. This alone should inspire humility. History is not a closed case file. It is a reconstruction, a working model built from surviving evidence. When new evidence appears, the model changes. That does not mean every alternative theory is true. Many are weak. Some collapse under scrutiny. Some mistake ambiguity for proof. Some project modern fantasies onto ancient stone. But skepticism should cut in more than one direction. It should challenge careless speculation. And it should challenge premature certainty. Because human beings have a habit of mistaking the current map for the entire territory. Ancient Egypt itself emerged from a long prehistory. Before dynasties, there were settlements. Before monuments, there were symbols. Before kings, there were communities shaping landscapes, tracking celestial cycles, burying their dead with care, organizing labor, and passing knowledge through generations. Civilization did not appear from nowhere. It condensed from deeper currents. The question is how deep those currents go, and what may have been lost before they surfaced in written history. This is why the pyramids continue to fascinate not just scholars, but the wider world. They trigger a feeling more primal than curiosity. They trigger recognition. The sense that these monuments contain a message addressed not only to the past, but to the future. Not a literal inscription waiting to be translated, but a challenge. Look again. Measure again. Question again. Do not assume the story is finished. Standing before the Great Pyramid, one can imagine generations doing exactly that. Priests in linen, Greek travelers, Roman officials, medieval chroniclers, Napoleonic surveyors, Victorian occultists, modern archaeologists, engineers, geologists, tourists, filmmakers, dreamers, skeptics, mystics. Each arrives with a theory. Each leaves with the monument still fundamentally intact, still withholding something. The Sphinx intensifies that feeling. It has no surviving explanatory inscription that resolves its deepest ambiguities. Its face is wounded. Its nose is gone. Its body has endured burial, excavation, repair, damage, and reinterpretation. It is both one of the most familiar images on Earth and one of the least settled in meaning. It stands as if guarding a threshold, not just between desert and Nile, or life and death, but between known history and the possibility of a forgotten one. And perhaps that is the real power of these monuments. Not that they prove a single alternative theory. Not that they confirm lost continents, celestial architects, or impossible technologies. But that they expose how fragile certainty can be. The ancient world was not primitive in the way modern arrogance often imagines. It was sophisticated, observant, symbolically dense, and often more intellectually integrated than our fractured categories allow. Science, religion, architecture, astronomy, ritual, and kingship were not separate domains. They were facets of one ordered reality. A monument could be tomb, temple, calendar, symbol, political declaration, cosmological diagram, and ritual instrument at the same time. Modern thinking often wants one answer. Ancient monuments may require many. So were the pyramids tombs? Possibly, at least in part. Were they also astronomical statements? Almost certainly. Were they ceremonial technologies of transformation built to align king, kingdom, and cosmos? Very likely. Could they encode inherited knowledge older than the dynasties that used them? The possibility remains open. Is the Sphinx older than the accepted date? The debate continues. Was there a forgotten civilization before Egypt, erased by catastrophe and remembered only in fragments? No definitive proof exists. But neither has the question disappeared. And perhaps it never will. Because these structures were built at a scale that resists closure. They are too large to ignore, too precise to dismiss, too ancient to fully recover, and too symbolically charged to reduce to a single function. They endure because they are monuments. They haunt because they are unresolved. In the end, the pyramids and the Sphinx confront us with more than archaeological uncertainty. they confront us with a philosophical problem. How much of human history is missing? How much knowledge has been lost, buried, drowned, or ground into dust? How many beginnings have there been? How many endings? How many times has civilization mistaken itself for the first light, while standing unknowingly among the ruins of an older dawn? These questions do not weaken the achievements of ancient Egypt. They deepen them. If the Egyptians built the pyramids entirely through their own genius, then their accomplishment is one of the greatest in human history. If they inherited part of a deeper legacy, then they become not lesser, but even more fascinating, custodians of ancient knowledge, translators of memory into stone. Either way, the mystery remains worthy of reverence. Because the pyramids are not merely objects. They are provocations. They force the modern mind into confrontation with scale, time, silence, and forgotten intelligence. They remind us that the past is not dead material. It is active. It questions us back. And perhaps that is why they still command the world. Not because we have solved them, but because we have not. Not because they belong neatly to history, but because they stand at the edge of it. At sunrise, the stone glows. At night, the stars return. The plateau becomes what it has always been, a meeting place between earthbound humanity and the vast architecture above. The same sky that ancient priests watched. The same horizon that kings claimed. The same silence that swallowed names, dates, and certainties. And still the monuments endure. Still the questions return. Who built them? How did they build them? What knowledge guided their hands? Why were these forms chosen? What was intended and what has been forgotten? Were these monuments endings? Beginnings? Messages? Warnings? Memorials to the dead? Or markers left for the living? Perhaps the greatest mystery is not hidden in a sealed chamber or buried beneath the sand. Perhaps it lies in the possibility that history is far stranger, far less complete, and far more fragile than we have been willing to admit. The pyramids may be masterpieces of dynastic Egypt. They may also be echoes of a deeper inheritance. The Sphinx may be a royal monument of the Old Kingdom. It may also be the survivor of an older world, reshaped by later hands. The truth may rest somewhere between orthodox certainty and wild speculation, in a territory where evidence is incomplete, interpretation is contested, and the stones themselves remain the most honest witnesses. They do not explain. They endure. They do not argue. They remain. And in their silence, they continue to ask the question that has echoed across centuries. What if the story of civilization did not begin where we were told it began? What if the first chapter we know is not the first chapter that was written? What if beneath the desert, beneath the dynasties, beneath the myths and the monuments and the names of kings, there lies the fractured memory of something older, something brilliant, something lost, something almost erased? And what if the pyramids were never meant to answer that mystery, but to preserve it?